Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And we have coming up a pretty fun set of missions, I think. We're going to be starting off with a Mercury Tello 1, so we're going to be really kicking off our Mercury program with an uncrewed launch. Then we're moving on to a... we're going to have some maneuvers for our Venus flyby. I think we're going to be actually getting there pretty shortly here. And then we're going to be launching something at the moon. So yeah, lots of really cool stuff, high value, high science possibilities, although the Mercury one is kind of a vanity launch just to test things out, make sure everything's okay. But yeah, lots of really cool stuff that I'm really excited about, so let's get to it. Rolled out to the pad and ready for the first launch is our Mercury Tello rocket. This is Mercury Tello 1, and it has the upgraded engines that I mentioned before, and on board is Enos the chimp. Once again, we have another uncrewed flight where we put a chimpanzee on board. This is basically Mercury Atlas 5. But before I go into too much detail, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff of the Mercury Tello 1. All right, fantastic. So we are on our way up into hopefully a good orbit. We are testing out the H1C engines. These are the slightly different versions. These are the ones that approximate the LR-89s, kind of, sort of. I'm not sure that they're like intended to be one-to-one matches of them, or like they don't copy the model or anything, but they seem to fill the same niche. And so I'm using these as booster engines for my my Tello rockets now, and they give me just a tiny bit extra delta V, and are a little bit more reliable and a little bit cheaper than the LR-89s in the same technology level. Verniers seem to be struggling a little bit to orient us, but we've gotten there. And yeah, so we are on our way up, and this is actually using the LR-105 version. It's the, I want to say, the NA-7, which was used on the Atlas E rockets, but that was actually never used on the Mercury Atlas program. It was used on a test flight with another chimp where they flew an Atlas E with a Mercury capsule, and it exploded, and it was terrible, and we lost everything. But the Atlas D, I hear, is the one that was used for the actual manned manned Mercury program. So that is not what we'll be using. We'll be using a weird hodgepodge that is even further from the historical construction. I've been using the Atlas D for basically everything, but now that there's upgrades, I don't know why I wouldn't use them. So we are on our way up, and the 3 booster engines seem to be working just fine so far. It's a nice upgrade on the LR-105 as well as the side boosters that are the H1Cs. It basically it increased our ignition failure rate, but it also dropped our data units from like 9,000 down to 2,000, which means that we have a lot more room for improvement, and this number should go down pretty dramatically, which will be very, very nice. But yeah, this is a full-on dress rehearsal because I am scared to lose any of my pilots. We are... Oh no! Okay. Alright, what do I do? Let's see. If I can just... Actually, it looks like we are regaining control. Those Vernier engines are magic. We are almost in control again. Look at that! Look at that nonsense! And let's kick off the booster stages. One of which failed on me, darn it! Ooh, man, that was terrifying. And this is why... You know, I thought about making this first test, so the training was just completed for Johnny Flores and my other new pilot, whose name escapes me at the moment. they were ready. Like, they were there, and they were like, all right, put me in, let's go. But I did not want to do anything that would cause a loss of life. It's not something that is actually career ending, I don't think. I'm not sure what mechanical punishments actually exist for losing pilots in RP-1, and I hope to never find out. That was a big part of the reason why I wanted to make sure to do this uncrewed test. I was not even planning to have the available reach orbit and return safely to Earth contract. Like, I was thinking that I was going to have that done with the Corona program, and this was going to be a completely superfluous launch that was getting in the way of me getting more science and all that, but whew, when you have a booster failure like that that nearly tears apart your craft, that's yeah, you feel pretty glad that you did the testing instead of putting it, just doing it live. So yeah, it was just a poor chimp Enos that had to bear with that, and not a human, which is good. But just like I'm doing, the actual Mercury Atlas V mission was planned to be basically a dress rehearsal for the real thing, because the very next flight of a Mercury Atlas was indeed Mercury Atlas 6, which was the first American in orbit. So they did basically everything pretty darn close to the way that they were going to do it on the actual flight. Jeb is having a lot of trouble figuring out how it wants to try to do this. Actually, I think the problem might be I no longer actually have enough Delta V to get into orbit, which actually makes plenty of sense. So let's just kill my rotation, and we're just going to burn sideways and see how close we get. Yeah, I am not surprised that we don't actually have the Delta V to get into orbit. There was a little bit of extra packed on there. This version of the Atlas Tela is capable enough to get just this Mercury capsule well into orbit and beyond. But yeah, so that's not going to cut it. We are not going to orbit today, but there's no reason to let this be wasted. Although that does mean I'm going to have to make sure I send something up to do this contract. I think I'll be able to do probably my next Corona satellite, because this is a year-long thing. So yeah, no reason not to do my initial plan with a Corona. But yeah, we are going to be coming back down. This is going to be a pretty grim suborbital trajectory. It's not too bad, hopefully. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, we're going to be coming down pretty darn fast, so this may not survive. Enos the chimp may not make it back home. So we are going to separate. And I'm going to feel very smug about doing my testing. Activate our roll control. And it's time to assume the re-entry position. Extend the antenna. And there we have it. So we're going to save our retrograde thrusters until we are just about in the atmosphere, I think. Yeah, so in Enos the Chimp's actual orbit, he was going to orbit 3 times, but only orbited twice because there were issues with both the cooling system and also the attitude control thrusters. One of them was kind of stuck on, and they were able to maintain position and correctly perform guidance maneuvers, but it was causing a lot of fuel to be kind of dumped overboard, basically, and they were worried about having enough to get back home. So lots of issues that they troubleshooted and dealt with on orbit. They ended up fixing the environment control thing so that Enos could be nice and comfortable on his flight, but they brought him down after just 2 orbits, and I am sincerely hoping that we will be able to bring him home as well. All right, so we are just about touching the atmosphere, so I am going to fire our retrograde thrusters, and that is going to cut our delta V by a marginal amount. I've decided to just not try anything fancy and just see what it's like if we just burn retrograde as opposed to doing anything different. It's not going to be an apples-to-apples test because this is a suborbital trajectory and ballistic, and that's not going to necessarily be what we do when we come home, when we bring our manned mission home. And it's also not, it's a lot more Delta V, I think, or maybe pretty similar. No, I think it's more Delta V, a lot more Delta V than even the Redstone was able to create. All right, so now it's time to kick off these. Our retrograde, our retro motor pack, which is now tumbling along us as it wants to fly away and have more drag. We are going to arm our parachute as we fly down into a sunset. All right, it begins to turn orange as things get real toasty. Ooh, man, that is real toasty. Oh no, this may just burn up. Yeah, we've got a blader coming off, but way too slowly, it looks like. Oh! Wait, what was that? What burned off? Was that my, that might have been my roll control thruster. Yeah, I think that was my roll control thruster. For some reason, I guess that was out in the airstream and got cooked and exploded. The ablator on the Mercury capsule is working just fine. Yeah, that was no problem for that at all. It made it look like the whole thing was going to explode, but it was, I think it was, I'm pretty sure. Yep, it is gone indeed. So yeah, I must have placed it wrong or something, because it got caught some airstream and then exploded. But yeah, it looks like we are going to come back home just fine, which I am relieved about. All right, so our parachute has deployed. Not much interesting to talk about because it's very, very dark. Turn the lights on here, which gives us just a little bit of something. But yeah, so with the aftermath of the Mercury Atlas 5 mission, unfortunately Enos died about a year after his mission for unrelated causes to his space flight. But splashdown. But this meant that the Mercury Atlas vehicle could be qualified to carry humans into orbit, which I think it's going to do for us as well. With that booster failure, I think that is going to give us enough data units to make that rocket a little more reliable, and I think it will be safe, but I'm going to take a look at the numbers before we launch. All right, we are about an hour away from our encounter with Venus. So let's go ahead and take a look. We have a good connection with Earth, which is fantastic. We focus on Venus. We will lose signal. Looks like we will be going behind the planet as it relates to Earth. And we are just skimming the surface at about 118 kilometers. So we may want to raise that just a touch. All right, so we're going to activate our avionics, and we are just going to... There we go. Let's just bring that up to about 170. I don't actually know exactly where the atmosphere starts on Venus, so I think it's around that. So I can't imagine it's much higher than Earth, so I guess we'll see. But yeah, that is the plan. So we are cruising in, and then we will swoop down into this very close flyby. All right, we can see that we are still sending back orbital perturbation science, but there's not a whole lot going on out here around the sun. We sent back some science from around the sun, which is lovely, but it's not a life-changing amount of science. But we are on our way in. We are rotating just slightly. I don't even want to... You know what? I don't need to correct that. I want this to be exactly what it is. Okay, we are in around space high around Venus. We can see it's there still very distantly, and a whole bunch of science is being sent back even as we speak. Just credits after credits, visible imaging, pressure scans, micrometeorites, or all that is running now. We are not going to get a ton of it. But all of these short duration ones are definitely going to be sending stuff back. We've already transmitted 76 science with this thing, which is lovely. All right, so our flyby is going to last a total of 3 days, which is fabulous. That's actually a lot longer than I expected. And we have about a day to get down to Parasite, which means I do need to, in fact, stabilize a little bit here. So let's go ahead and execute this and make sure. And now I can actually just watch my Parasite right here. You can see that even this translation in space a little bit is making it is changing my Parasite quite a bit, because I guess my craft is not as stable as I thought it was. But just a little adjustment as such, and we are all set. 175 kilometers I think is just fine, and that keeps us safe because I really want this craft to survive. Yeah, so now let's just start warping in. And we can watch the approach and watch the science come in. As Venus gets larger and larger in the sky, well, in our field of view, we can imagine the pictures being taken, the first up-close shots, whereas before we'd only been able to see this planet from telescopes from far away. We can see the death ball that is Venus. It is a soup of noxious acid and carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases that would tear this vessel apart if I were to dip too close into the atmosphere. But yeah, it's a place that I hope to visit again with more probes and to study the atmosphere. Just an hour away from our Parasite now. Let's just double check what that will look like. Yep, so we are going to lose connection while we are on that side of the planet, and then we should, in theory, come through on the other side. It looks like a featureless ball, but you can kind of see just like the subtle hint, the texture of the clouds that swaddle the planet, basically. All right, so we are dipping down into, I think that must be space low, right? Yep, we are in space low, so look at this, all this science is coming again. Transmitting tremendous amounts of science. And still transmitting at 2.6 kilobits per second, which is just lovely. This far away, you can be almost assured that you have some kind of connection with the Deep Space Network, which means you don't have to... like you do with like remote tech, you don't have to have a big relay network. Look at this beauty. We have lost connection with the probe as it dips past over the horizon. Earth is somewhere distant. Man, this really does just look like a big featureless ball. And we are screaming lower. Look at that. Now you can see the textures of the tops of the clouds. Look at that. As we scream through at almost 11 kilometers per second relative to this thick, soupy atmosphere. What does it say? Minimum safe altitude, 145 kilometers. Yeah, so we were, I think I guessed right. 175 is just fine. All right, and we have ended our very close flyby, and we are now ascending once again. Ooh, look at that blue sunset. Gorgeous. All right, we begin to recede. Flung by the immense gravity of Venus around it and changing our trajectory dramatically. All right, we have connection once again, and so you can see the data is transmitting rapidly. The science experiments are no match for this big S-band dish that we have on the end here, even if it is very, very far away. Fantastic. All right. So we've transmitted about 150 science so far, and we still have another couple of days, or a day or so, before this exits the sphere of influence of Venus. So there's still some science going, but most of the science that I have now is stuff that is going to take tens of days, which is obviously not going to be good enough. All right, off we go. We are now, like I said, we have a day and 15 hours until we leave the sphere of influence of Venus, and then we will be back in the heliocentric space with the hope that maybe someday we will be able to visit Venus once again and use it to get even lower in our trajectory, in our orbit. All right, with Venus just a distant tiny crescent, we are ready now to re-enter the heliocentric sphere of influence, and I think that was it. And so there we go. That is our early flyby, and we have contract complete Venus flyby. The data is coming in now. We got a ton of money and a bunch of reputation, which is good because we failed our Mars version of this contract. All right, so yeah, this is what our trajectory looks like afterwards. And remember, this was an ellipse that started down here when I first started here. So look at how much our orbit has changed just by flying by, which is pretty darn cool, right? So I'm going to set this as target, and I just want to, I'm curious. Ha, look at that. Okay, so if I make just a tiny adjustment to my orbit in 143 days, then I will meet up again with Venus in about 3,000 days. That's definitely not going to be useful to me in any way, but it's kind of fun, right? So yeah, the power of flybys. All right, so I just wanted to kind of see what that might look like. It looks like even with even if I spend all of my fuel to try to get that into a tighter rendezvous, it's not going to be enough to matter at all. So it's just kind of a fun thing, not something I'm going to worry about. This probe has definitely served its purpose, and we'll continue doing orbital perturbation experiments around the sun for the next 10 years. But with it finished, I am going to make sure the avionics are turned off. We are not going to be concerned with its battery or supply, and it is just going to be a satellite that we let gather science for us after having served us very well in the flyby of Venus. All right, so we have accumulated 150 science and now 436,000 funds, which I'm going to use to cancel the Mars flyby contract because I believe that you lose less if you do it like the sooner you cancel, the less the penalty that you take. Which is pretty unfortunate because we're going to lose a lot more than than just the advance. It's kind of a bummer, but is what it is. We did our best, and we were not able to complete that. It was a little ambitious to try to do both, but you know, is what it is. The trick is that the next transfer window is in about 650 days, but then that leaves 0 flight time. So there's just nothing that we can really do to make this flyby. We will be hitting that next window for sure, but we're not going to be able to do this contract at that time. We'll have to pick it up once again. So very unfortunate. We're going to lose all of our hard-earned reputation. Adoop. That's a damn shame, but is what it is. Oh, look at that. We actually have a contract now for orbiting Venus. I guess that is what the next step is after getting your Venus flyby and an Atmospheric Venus probe, very cool. You could probably do both of these at once. Do that Venera style. That would be really neat. Landing on Venus? Oh my god, that sounds like kind of a lot. A rover on Venus. Sure. Yeah, that sounds totally doable. Yeah, so it looks like after you visit a planet for the first time, you unlock all of the other contracts you can do around them, starting with all the uncrewed stuff, which is very, very cool. And that has also opened up a Mercury and Jupiter flyby, although I think the Mercury flyby is a bit of a trick because that is way harder than any of the other ones so far, even Jupiter, I think. Definitely going to need gravity assists, probably for both of them. Oh, look at that. We can even do a ScanSat around Venus. That'd be fun. Yeah, so our next mission to Venus is going to be exciting indeed. All right, 150 science. Fabulous. I'm really excited about that. I think the first thing I want to do is unlock Advanced Capsule Era Materials Science to get new service module and separate structure tanks. That should be useful. It also allows us to have fuel ducts, which will allow me to do like asparagus stage type stuff. I'm not sure if I will do that, but it's something that is now available to me, which is exciting. And that's an important thing towards second generation capsules. So we unlock that, and now we actually have second generation capsules available. We could unlock that next, and that would get us Gemini. I think instead of getting directly into capsules, which we'll get to, that's on my list of priorities, but before we get there, there's some other things that I'd like to do first, and that would be early Hydrolox engines. So that is going to give us the second configuration of our lovely RL-10, which will probably be actually usable since it's not going to be an early prototype that failed a bunch. It also gives us things like the LR-87 that uses liquid hydrogen, which I didn't know was a thing. In AJ-10 Advance, it uses liquid hydrogen. An Agena that uses hydrogen. Wow, I didn't realize there were so many things that were... no, not liquid hydrogen. This says liquid fluorine. But anyways, that's a cryogenic stage of some sort, I have to imagine. I'll look into that a little bit more later on. But yeah, lots of new engine configurations that are not prototype, but actually the early used ones that I think will be very, very useful for my upper stages going forward. So that is stage 2 there. I'm also pushing hard towards early docking procedures because there's new RCS upgrades, RCS technology levels, new generic thrusters, docking ports, all sorts of really cool stuff. I'd like to get that sooner rather than later. So I think I'm going to go into improved flight control next, which is going to get me a 2 kilonewton generic thruster, which opens up options for larger probes, bigger attitude jets, bigger RCS quads, and all sorts of stuff like that. Very exciting. Yeah, so I think that is good. 1963 orbital rocketry is not a super exciting node to me anyways. There's an LR-79 upgrade, and the E1, one of those tested but never flown engines that is pretty popular in some of these nodes. So I don't know if this will actually be useful, but maybe it could be fun. Something to play with anyways, give me a lot of different options for what my boosters are going to look like, because coming up I'm going to need to build a 350-ton launch vehicle, which will be able to sling lots of stuff into orbit. We are starting to get to the regime where we need heavy stuff. And we have this much science to get before we have to upgrade our R&D facility, so got to keep that in mind as well. All right, so we have 7 upgrades that we got for free from that mission, which is just super awesome. I'm going to buy a couple more, not too many, because there's a bunch of part unlocks that are going to be coming, and we're going to spend some in the vehicle assembly building, and we're going to spend some over in R&D because I do need that to keep moving on. Yeah, we're going to keep the VAB is going to stay a little bit ahead. But yeah, that gets a Thor Agena is done in 40 days. A Tela is done in about 56 to 57 days. This is a little bit more than the similar architecture of the Surveyor because it has extra pre-flight on the engines. Yeah, and these nodes are getting pretty slow. So yeah, we should probably focus a little bit more on R&D in the future. But we have enough missions right now that we can do with the technology we have that I'm not that stressed about it. The important thing is just that we are pushing forward and we are always having research that we can do. So there we go. Just 2 hours left on the countdown for the launch of another Tele-1E, or actually I've been calling this the Tele-1H1C. And that is heading to the moon with this Surveyor 1 craft. Just 3, 2, 1, ignition. And liftoff of a Tele-1 rocket using the modified H1C variant of our Tele launch vehicle. So we are heading up with yet another Tele launch. We are headed back to the moon to attempt to put the first robotic lander on the moon. Yes, indeed. So this is like the Surveyor mission, which I've actually just straight up appropriated the name because I like it. But we are launching now into the phase of the moon, plane of the moon, and we are about a year or so late in real time compared to when the actual Surveyor mission was launched. I feel like MechJet behaves a little bit differently than it did before. Not sure what that's about, but I've been kind of keeping up with the developer version of MechJet and working through some troubleshooting stuff. So yeah, there's some slight weirdness, so I'm going to be doing this launch not manually, but there's like some kind of bug in my construction of this rocket that causes it to completely lose its mind when it separates this upper stage. So we're going to be taking care of the circularization and translunar injection manually. All right, getting a little toasty. About 10 seconds to first stage cutoff when we will separate off our shiny new H1C boosters, which have already put on just a ton of data units. And separate. Pop, and there they go. Yeah, we've already put on a lot of data units in our frequent usage of those new engines, and I feel like we're going to max it out fairly quickly with how often I plan on using it. It's going to be on, like, 2 of them on every single Tele launch and 1 on every one of my Thor launches. So, yeah, we'll get a lot of data out of that one. All right, just a couple seconds until main engine cut off. And there we go. So let's go ahead and pop the fairing, and we will stage off our engine. And no, it did the thing. All right, and taking over manually, it's time to go ahead and circularize this orbit with our Agena upper stage engine. Things look a little tiny bit different with my trajectory. It's because I did indeed have to reload because I mentioned that I was taking control manually to avoid a bug, but then I didn't. And then the bug threw me out of whack and I had to launch again. So this is my second attempt. All right, just a couple seconds until we are staging. And fire up the engine and away we go. Looks like we have a good ignition on our Agena B. All right, so we'll time warp through this part of it. We were holding on the node, and that should all be fine. So yeah, this is, hopefully it's going to be pretty good. We had a thrust loss on this attempt when we were on one of the engines, on one of the side engines, right before we cut off. So it threw it a little bit out of whack, so I'm hoping that we still have plenty of Delta V to make this maneuver, and it looks like we'll be totally fine, but it's always a little bit of a worry. And cut off. Fabulous. Okay, so we are now in a good orbit around Earth in the plane of the moon with our Surveyor 1 lander. So the next step, probably on our next orbit, we are going to go ahead and get our transfer. And the interesting thing about this trajectory is this is kind of based on one of the plans that I saw on the RP-1 Discord, is to do a direct ascent, or a direct descent, I suppose I should say. and land directly from your flyby trajectory, which should actually be an impact trajectory, and just turn that into a landing. And you can do that with what that gets you is that gets you an unguided burn of almost 3,000 meters per second of delta V, which is lovely when you're talking about getting that done in the around the moon. All right, so we have a good trajectory set up, and now it's just a matter of making our insertion burn towards the moon. All right, so our burn starts in just 50 more seconds, and like I said, we'll be attempting to do this one manually as well. MacLeod, for whatever reason, does not like this design. I've had no end of trouble with it, and I'm fairly certain it's this design's fault. There's some kind of horrible ghost inside this design that causes it to fail when MacLeod attempts to run it. Like, for example, I clicked execute next node and it just lit the engine. It just, for no reason, it then started time warping, but it lit the engine just to get rid of the ignition, I guess, which is pretty frustrating. So had to reload that one again, but we are here. We are ready to go in just 8 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and ignition. Hey, we have a good second light on our Agena B engine. Fantastic. Okay, so another 2 minutes of burn on this, and we will be headed towards the moon as we are drifting slowly off of the trajectory. What is happening? Okay, I think it had this selected, but it was not actually using smartass to hold my position. Goodness gracious. Anyways, a couple more minutes of burn, and then we should be on a good trajectory, and then we will be correcting with it. So this is my standard Agena upper stage with a little twist. This is Deep Space Avionics, which I'm not sure how else I was supposed to make this trajectory, but putting Deep Space Avionics on this stage seemed to be the only thing that worked. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we are on our way over. So the real Surveyor one was a little bit more bold even than what I've done here. Not only did they have a no parking orbit around Earth, I don't think they did one around the moon either. They went direct from Earth to the moon. Straight line, no parking orbits, just all the way, which is bonkers to me. Like, it's kind of bonkers to me, the idea of not doing a parking orbit around the moon before doing a landing, for goodness sake. But that is exactly what we are going to attempt to do. All right, so we have just a couple more seconds of burning to go. This is going pretty well so far. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and cut off. We overshot. We overshot a bit. Let's see how bad that was. Pretty bad, pretty bad. All right, so we are going to go point retrograde. And I'm going to attempt to use some of my high test peroxide to bring our Paraloon down just a touch, because we don't have any more ignitions, but we have plenty of RCS to point us, and yeah, this is going to work just fine. So we bring that in, and I have a couple things that I am considering in my choice of target here. I would like to, I don't think I can be precise enough to like pick my biome. I don't even know anything about the biomes yet. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that we are going to be in a position that is going to have line of sight back to Earth. That's consideration the first. So I want that, and I also wanted sun, and that is not an issue. But it looks like this way we'll land in the southern hemisphere of the moon, but we'll do so in a place that should, in theory, still have full sight lines to Earth for communication, because I do not have any relay satellites around the moon or around Earth for that matter. All right, so the trick to this trajectory, and the one that I didn't really think of on my own, was having this be a deep space probe. Because I tried all kinds of different, like packing on a bunch of batteries or whatever. I tried bigger solar panels. Nothing worked until I decided to just make this a deep space probe, so I could just go boop. Oh, look at that! We've shed 143 watts of power consumption. And that gives us 12.5 hours of battery power, which will last through any amount of nighttime that you might be concerned about. So we are going to switch over to the advanced sun. Let's see where it is today. We'll try down. Press the action button to release the solar panels. Turn back on the avionics. And execute this roll. All right, and so that will point us at the sun and get us full solar panel coverage, which hopefully will allow us to communicate and save power so that we are full up by the time we get to the moon. So we have all kinds of different science experiments packed on this vessel, but they are all intended for being landed. So I don't have a lot of the things like the orbital perturbation science experiment and things like that that would only be useful when, in orbit. This does not include an orbiter. This part is going to smash directly into the moon. All right, so we can just shut down those avionics. There we go. And you see now, duration perpetual, huzzah! So we have as much solar power as we need. We are taking in more than we are using at this point, even with our big UHF antenna that actually this is an S-band Omni antenna, which I'm hoping to get good signal because I want to transmit that data quickly before this thing, dies. It's kind of an experiment in radio technology for me as well, but mostly just out of my own pure ignorance. All right, so we are sailing along, and I can talk a little bit about Surveyor 1, which, like I said, did a nice... All right, so we are on our way. We are connected by S-band. You can tell by the fact that we have 82.5 kilobits per second, which is the same as what that dish was getting at roughly this range, which... The range on an Omni antenna is not going to be that great, but it should be plenty for the moon, especially at this technology level and RF band. It does cost a lot of power, but that's not a problem. We now have solar panels that can deal with that. So the real Surveyor was sent out, and it was like as caveman as you could possibly imagine it. We sent it on the direct trajectory, and then it came in to land in the same way that we did here. It was a very, very direct flight, no low energy transfers and low orbits and things like that. And so we now fly through space, and we are approaching the sphere of influence of the moon. We have entered indeed. We now have about 15.5 hours to our impact, and when we get a little bit closer, I'll show you kind of what the purpose of this is and kind of talk you through the rest of it. We obviously are not going to light up this engine again. That's not what this is for. But remember, this stage here is dumb. I do not have any kind of avionics on this stage, so I am going to need to point it, spin it, and burn it. In the way that we used to do around Earth, but you need to have, deep space avionics to make that happen, so no worries there. But then we have our little tiny lander up on top here, which I've used just this procedural probe core that has the cool little, like, landy bits. It looks a little bit like it has a lander frame, which I enjoyed because we are going to attempt to land directly on the probe core itself. All right, so we are getting a bit closer. We are now 10 hours out, and it looks like we should be fine on this trajectory, I think. I'm pretty confident that this will still have connection where we are going to be landing. I hope. All right, 5 hours to go. 4, 3 hours as the moon approaches, or we approach the moon. The moon isn't going anywhere. Yeah, so this is one of those mission profiles that I definitely love the Discord community for RP-1 for how helpful they are and the way that they share information and mission profiles and things like that, because there's some steps on here that I just wouldn't have thought about. Like getting out to this point, I think makes sense. When I realized that I needed to have deep space avionics just to move anything in this vicinity, because you lose near Earth communications or avionics above, I think, 20 million meters, something like that. When I realized that made this part make sense, but then having this dumb-fired stage to save weight was just... That's the cool stuff that I go to the Discord and look into the community to find out good tips on and things like that, because that's kind of an axiom around there. Is one of the things that you always do if you want to save weight. If you want to save weight on a mission profile, figure out what stage you can make unguided. And apparently that one is this, and it's not something I would have considered. I like the idea of having full control of my probes at all time. But if you want to save a whole bunch of kilograms of weight on a stage, then that is the way to do it, because there's a whole bunch of support hardware that I just don't need because I'm reusing it. All right, we got about 10 minutes left. Where's Earth? I've lost Earth. Oh gosh, okay, there it is. Well, I mean, I'm kind of committed now, so... This just kind of is what it is at this point. All right, we have about 7 minutes left, and I think it's time, as we get a little bit closer, to start thinking about how we are going to pull the trigger on this final approach. I've opened up Kerbal Engineer's Suicide Burn stuff. It's under their landing tab, and it has a pretty good idea of when you should pull the trigger on a given suicide burn. And so we're going to follow this fairly closely, but the way that this thing is built, we have 5 minutes left, this is going to point us, once I turn on the avionics. Oh, I have control. Thank goodness. I was a little worried. We are going to point ourselves away from our... we're going to point directly down our surface retrograde vector, and that is going to be where we're going to do the vast majority of our burn. And when we do not have full control, we still have control of engine on, engine off. So I can hit X and shut off the throttle when we get really close. And so that's basically what we are looking to do, because I'm going to need this stage to ullage and also to spin up this upper stage to make sure it stays stable through its burn. All right, we are about 2 minutes out from our suicide burn. We still have good connection, so we are looking good so far, although Earth is pretty low on the horizon. But in any case, it's time for us to just spin to win, so I'm turning off MacLeod control here, and we are spinning up. And in another couple of seconds, we are going to start... Uh-oh. What happened? Oh, no! Oh, no! I lost the Earth entirely. Well, start ullaging, I guess. Oh, gosh. Okay, so we are... Okay, we are okay on ullage. We are spinning and precessing a little bit. Are we not balanced? Am I not as balanced as I thought I was either? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, here we go. I guess we're gonna see what happens. Oh, look at that. That precession is getting worse. Oh no. Okay. Well, there's literally nothing I can do about it now. So we are coming down, and my only hope is that MacLeod is going to allow me to do surface velocity negative control when my avionics come back on. Because remember, I have no avionics right now. We are just doing our best to cut velocity, and I'm just watching and waiting until we have cut as much velocity as we possibly can with this. Okay, so I'm going to cut that engine and fire it off, and we are now... Oh, right, hold on. Activate avionics. Hey, look at that. Okay. Maybe we're okay. We are still spinning towards freedom, and freedom is the lunar surface in this instance, in this context. Oh my gosh, I really need you to turn. Okay, engine's lit. Generic thrusters are lit. Can I possibly... Oh, I have no control except for what it gives me. I don't think we're going to make it. No! Smash. Well, we've learned some stuff. We've learned, put yourself in freaking sight of the Earth. I even said that on the way over here, and I thought that I was good, but I didn't check enough. And sure enough, there is no Earth in the sky for us to get our signal. So that is that. That is a failed mission, unfortunately. And I've also determined that there's some unbalance on my probe core. So I think I need to just scrap that design, rebuild it with similar parameters, and hopefully it will actually be stable on its way down. So we'll try that again next time. All right, well, even though we have failed that last moon landing mission, that's kind of RP-1 for you. You can make all the plans that you want and think things will work out, but there's something that you may have done just slightly wrong that ends up failing the mission for you, and that's just something that's okay. Like, it's really fine to not make these missions all in the first try and have this be like an expert class on doing things perfectly the first time every time. Like, I'm learning as I go through this, and I'm having a blast, like just learning from you guys in the comments. People leave me really great feedback there, and people talk about like the way that they do things and trouble that they're having. I learn a lot from folks on the Discord who are much better at this than I am. So yeah, it's something that I'm really enjoying, kind of learning and growing and doing better every time, and taking new things into consideration as I go through. So hope you are all enjoying it as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.